Listen close, friends. You're going to want to sit down for this one. Grab a hot drink and steel your nerves, because today's story is not for the faint of heart. It's one of those tales that ignites a fire in your belly. You'll want to scream at the screen, you'll weep with fury, but trust me, the payoff is worth every tear. Have you ever felt like you truly knew someone, only to realize you were sharing a bed with a monster? Well, that nightmare was our hero's reality. But before we dive in, Queens, if you live for these sagas of romance, betrayal, and karmic justice, hit that subscribe button right now, smash the like. It costs you $0, but it means the world to me and keeps these juicy stories coming your way. Done? Perfect. Let's get the show on the road. Our drama begins on a crisp Friday evening in the heart of Polanco, Mexico City. One of those zip codes where the air smells like old money and potholes don't exist. Enter Alejandro de la Vega. This man looked like he was sculpted by the gods themselves, 35 years old, wearing a charcoal Italian suit that hugged his athletic frame like a second skin. He wore the confident grin of a man who held the world in his palm. But Alejandro wasn't just a walking bank account, ladies. He had a gold heart to match. Tragically, that heart was blind. Blinded by a toxic love for the wrong woman. Tonight was his engagement party. He was about to pledge his life to Soraya, a woman with breathtaking beauty on the outside, but a soul darker than a moonless midnight. Alejandro whistled a soft tune, tossing the keys to his brand-new Mercedes-Benz in his hand. Soraya had sent him on an errand to fetch cases of champagne she claimed to have left in the trunk earlier that afternoon. "Coming, my love, almost there," he muttered, reflecting on just how lucky he was. Poor fool. He had no idea his luck was about to take a violent turn. He reached the car, gleaming under the street lamps. The night air was cool. He hit the fob. Chirp, chirp. The electronic sound echoed down the quiet street. He reached for the latch. Everything felt routine. Just another Friday in a perfect life. But destiny? Friends, destiny has a wicked sense of humor and loves to teach us lessons when our guard is down. He lifted the lid, and time itself froze. The keys slipped from his fingers. The clatter of metal hitting the pavement was the only sound before a scream died in his throat. His green eyes, usually sparkling with joy, blew wide open. Pure, unadulterated horror flooded his gaze. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own feet, clutching his head as if trying to scrub the image from his brain. "Oh my God!" The scream tore out of him, sounding completely alien to his own ears. There, curled into a tight ball inside the trunk, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane, was Rosita. She was his housekeeper, a young girl of barely 20. She was still wearing her wrinkled, dirty sky blue uniform, and those yellow rubber gloves she used for scrubbing floors were still on her hands. But Rosita wasn't alone. And this is what nearly stopped our millionaire's heart cold. Clutched to her chest, swaddled in ragged blankets, were 3 bundles, 3 babies, triplets, tiny things. Their faces were flush red from silent sobbing, eyes squeezed shut, seeking warmth from the girl who held them like a human shield. Rosita looked up. Her eyes were swollen, bloodshot, and filled with a panic that made the air turn ice cold. Her lip was split, a bruise blooming on her cheekbone. When she looked at Alejandro, she didn't see a savior. She saw an executioner. "Please don't kill me, Mr. Alejandro. For the love of everything holy, don't hurt me." Rosita sobbed, squeezing the infants tighter against her frail frame. Her voice was just a thread of desperation. "I swear on the Virgin Mary, I didn't do anything wrong." Alejandro stood paralyzed. His brain couldn't compute. Rosita, his sweet, quiet maid, stuffed in his trunk with 3 infants begging for her life? His heart was hammering against his ribs like a drum. He wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the scene was so grotesque, so alien to his luxury lifestyle, he was struck dumb. Then, a sharp, hungry cry from one of the babies broke his trance. "Rosita," he stammered, inching forward with his hands raised, approaching her like she was a wounded animal. "What? What are you doing in there? Whose children are those? You need to get out right now." "No, don't let her see me," Rosita shrieked, eyes darting in terror toward the mansion's entrance. "If she sees me, she'll kill us all. She'll kill the babies too." "She? Who are you talking about?" Alejandro asked, confusion washing over him. A chill raced down his spine. At that exact second, the mansion's front door flew open. Golden light from the party spilled onto the driveway, framing a female silhouette in the doorway. It was Soraya. She wore a blood-red dress, tight, incredibly expensive, and was dripping in jewels that flashed violently in the light. But looking at her now, that sweetness Alejandro had fallen for was gone. Her face was twisted, contorted by pure rage. "Alejandro!" Soraya screeched. It was that piercing tone he usually ignored, but right now it grated on his nerves. "What the hell are you doing? The guests are what—" She froze mid-sentence, spotting the open trunk. Her eyes narrowed instantly, scanning the scene like a predator locking onto prey. She clocked Rosita, then the babies, and for a split second, just a heartbeat, folks, panic flashed across her face. But villains are quick on their feet. They know how to pivot. That flash of fear vanished, instantly replaced by a mask of staged outrage. "You filthy thief!" Soraya screamed, storming down the marble steps. Her stilettos hit the stone like gunshots. "I knew you were trash! I knew I couldn't trust you!" Alejandro stepped between his fiancée and the car. "Soraya, hold on. Look at Rosita. She's terrified. She says—" "Shut up, Alejandro!" She cut him off, shoving him aside with shocking strength. "Look at her. She's stealing my nephews. She's kidnapping them." "Nephews?" Alejandro looked from the babies back to Soraya, completely baffled. He couldn't make sense of it. "What nephews? You never mentioned anything about babies staying here." Inside the trunk, Rosita shook her head frantically. Tears streamed down her face in silence, her eyes begging Alejandro to see through the lie. "They're distant cousins. They dropped by unexpectedly, so I put them down for a nap in the guest room." Soraya lied smoothly, slipping into the role of the frantic aunt. "And this beggar took advantage of the party to sneak them out to the car. She's kidnapping them for ransom. I bet she's working with a gang." "That's a lie!" Rosita screamed, finding a sudden spark of courage. "Mr. Alejandro, she's lying. She was going to—" "Shut your mouth!" Soraya lunged at the trunk before Alejandro could react. What happened next, folks, was so vicious it hurts just to think about it. Soraya grabbed Rosita by the hair and yanked her out of the car, completely ignoring the fragile infants in her arms. "Help!" Rosita cried out, curling around the babies to shield their heads as she hit the hard pavement. She scraped her knees and slammed her elbow, but she never loosened her grip on those children. Alejandro finally snapped out of it. His sense of decency cut through the confusion. "Enough!" he roared, grabbing Soraya by the waist and hauling her back. "Are you insane? Those are babies. Don't touch her!" A heavy, suffocating silence fell over them. The only sound was the desperate wailing of the three babies screaming at the top of their lungs, sensing Rosita's terror. Rosita lay on the ground, her blue uniform smeared with grease, her yellow cleaning gloves glowing almost comically under the street lamps. She looked up at him. "Sir?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Look at the blanket. Look at the yellow blanket." Alejandro furrowed his brow. He started to crouch down. He was about to look. He was seconds away from uncovering the truth that would change everything. But then, sirens. Blue and red lights flooded the street as police cruisers came screeching toward them. Soraya smiled. It was a twisted, triumphant, wicked little grin. "They're here," she said, smoothing her hair. "Now you'll see what happens to help who think they're clever." Alejandro felt his stomach drop. He looked at helpless Rosita on the ground, then at Soraya, cold as ice. And deep down he knew that injustice had just pulled up a chair at his dinner table. The patrol cars skidded to a halt, the screech of tires echoing against the mansion windows. 2 squad cars. 4 officers jumped out, weapons drawn, ready for a cartel shootout. Not a terrified girl shivering in the cold with 3 babies in her arms. "Hands in the air! Step away from the vehicle!" roared the lead officer, a burly guy with a mustache and a mean glare. Soraya flipped the switch instantly. The rage vanished, replaced by hysterical sobbing. Hollywood really missed out on a star with this one. She ran toward the cops with arms wide, delivering an Oscar-worthy performance. "Officers! Thank God you're here!" she sobbed, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Rosita. "That woman! That animal tried to steal my babies. We caught her hiding in the trunk, about to make a run for it." Alejandro tried to step in. He stood between them, hands raised. "Officer, hold on a second. I'm Alejandro de la Vega. This is my home. There's been a terrible misunderstanding here." "Misunderstanding?" Soraya snapped, spinning toward him with crocodile tears in her eyes. "Alejandro, please, she almost took the children. If I hadn't come down to find you, they'd be gone by now. Don't you dare defend her." The officer looked at Alejandro, glanced at the luxury car, took in the mansion, and finally looked down at Rosita on the pavement. As it often goes in this unforgiving world, the verdict was handed down based on appearances long before any trial took place. The officer saw wealth on one side and poverty on the other, and we all know which way the scales of justice tend to tip. "All right, miss, let go of the minors," the officer barked, looming over Rosita with a badge-heavy arrogance. "No!" Rosita scrambled backward, dragging herself across the rough asphalt. "Don't give them to her. She's going to hurt them. Mr. Alejandro, tell them. Tell them to check the blanket." Alejandro stood there, stunned into silence. Soraya's accusation was heavy, but the raw, protective instinct in Rosita's eyes was so genuine it caused a physical ache in his chest. "Officer, hold on a second," Alejandro interjected, shifting into the commanding tone of a seasoned CEO. "She is my most trusted employee. She has been with this household for 2 years. She hasn't ever taken a single penny. This doesn't make any sense." "There's a first time for every criminal, darling," Soraya spat, stalking toward Rosita. "Hand them over, you filth." Soraya lunged to snatch one of the infants. Rosita, reacting with the ferocity of a mother lion, slapped Soraya's hand hard to push her away. Smack. The sound was crisp and dry. Soraya stared at her hand for a split second before letting out a shriek as if her arm had been severed. "She assaulted me! Officers, did you see that? She hit me!" Soraya squealed. That was all the police needed. 2 agents swarmed Rosita. "That's enough out of you," one grunted, wrenching Rosita's arm behind her back with unnecessary force. "You're under arrest for attempted kidnapping and assault." "No, my babies!" Rosita's scream tore through the night. It was a howl of pure agony, a mother's anguish that made the hair on Alejandro's arms stand up. The police ripped the babies from her grasp. The little ones wailed uncontrollably, reaching their tiny hands out toward Rosita, instinctively knowing she was their only safe harbor. Soraya took the babies with a triumphant smirk she barely masked behind a look of concern, but she held them wrong, with disgust keeping them at arm's length so they wouldn't ruin her dress. Alejandro caught that detail. Small, but lethal. A loving aunt would have smothered them in kisses and comfort. Soraya looked like she was holding bags of garbage. Meanwhile, the handcuffs clicked shut on Rosita's slender wrists that had worked from dawn to dusk, scrubbing the messes of the rich. "Mr. Alejandro!" Rosita yelled as they hauled her to her feet. "Please, don't let her take them. There is a letter in the blanket, a letter from your brother." Alejandro froze. The world seemed to stop spinning. "What did you say?" He stepped toward her, shouldering past the officer blocking his path. "My brother Roberto?" Roberto had died a year ago in a mysterious accident. It was Alejandro's open wound. "Yes," Rosita sobbed, her face a mess of tears and desperation, the living image of despair. "He gave them to me. They are his sons, sir. They are your actual nephews." "Shut your mouth, you liar!" Soraya screamed louder to drown out the maid's voice. "She's making up insane stories to save her skin. Officer, get her out of here now. She's clearly on drugs or psychotic." The officer shoved Rosita toward the cruiser. She resisted, digging her heels into the ground, twisting her head desperately toward Alejandro. "The letter, sir! Find the letter!" Rosita begged, just before they forced her into the back seat and slammed the door with a final thud. Alejandro was left standing in the middle of the driveway. He watched Rosita through the glass of the patrol car, shouting words he could no longer hear. He saw her handcuffed hands. He watched her pounding against the window and saw her eyes, dark, profound, and honest, piercing him with a truth he was terrified to accept. The cruiser sped away. Rosita was hauled off like a common criminal when the only thing she had done was love and protect. Soraya walked back to Alejandro, awkwardly clutching the 3 crying babies. "Oh, honey, what a scare," she said, her voice shifting to a sugary sweetness as she brushed her shoulder against his arm. "Thank goodness I noticed in time. Imagine the scandal if that stray cat had taken them. Let's go inside. I need to call the agency to come take these kids to a safe place. I mean, to their parents." Alejandro pulled away from her touch. He felt sick. He didn't know why, but he felt a wave of revulsion. He looked down at the babies. They were beautiful, and there was something else. One of them had a small mole on his chin, identical to Roberto's, identical to his late brother. Alejandro's heart slammed against his ribs. "You said they were your nephews," Alejandro said, his voice deep and rough, refusing to look at her. "And they are, love. Distant ones." "I already told you," Soraya stammered, nervously adjusting her shawl. "But look, it's over. Let's go in. It's freezing out here and the guests are waiting for the toast." "You go inside," Alejandro said coldly. I need to check the car, to see if anything else is missing." "The car?" Soraya tensed up. "But baby, let the staff handle that tomorrow. Come have a drink with me." "I said go inside, Soraya." Alejandro turned to look at her. It was a hard stare, the gaze of the man who owned the De La Vega empire, not the look of a fiancé. Soraya gulped, nodded once, and turned around, muttering under her breath as she carried the babies into the mansion. Alejandro stood alone on the pavement. The street fell quiet around him, but this wasn't the silence of peace anymore. It was a silence heavy with unspoken secrets. He pivoted back toward the gaping trunk of his Mercedes. Right there in the shadows, where Rosita had been huddled just moments ago, something caught the dim trunk light. It wasn't gold, and it certainly wasn't cash. It was a frayed, faded yellow baby blanket wedged tight into the corner lining, and peeking out from the worn fabric was the corner of a crumpled, stained envelope. He knew that handwriting. He'd know it at the end of time. The air left his lungs in a rush. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably. He moved toward it with dread, stepping carefully as if approaching a live landmine. Reaching out, his fingers brushed the paper. The scrawl on the front was jagged and frantic. To my brother Alejandro, if you are reading this, I am already dead. Alejandro's knees turned to water. He collapsed onto the cold asphalt, clutching the letter. Inside the mansion, the orchestra swelled to celebrate a masquerade, while out here in the dark, the burning truth was scorching his palms. Rosita hadn't lied, and if she was telling the truth, then Soraya was a creature of pure malice, and he was scheduled to marry her. Oh, my dear friends, I hope you have your tissues ready. What comes next is going to shatter our hearts into 1,000 shards, but it's also going to spark that little flame of hope we all carry inside. We leave our poor Alejandro on his knees, utterly broken in the middle of that lonely street, holding a letter that weighed heavier than a tombstone. Can you imagine the agony? Realizing the woman sleeping beside you, the one swearing eternal love, is actually the devil wrapped in silk? Alejandro couldn't stop shaking. Those big, capable hands that signed million-dollar contracts without a flinch, now couldn't even hold a crumpled piece of paper steady. He tore the envelope open. The page was damp to the touch, maybe from Rosita's sweat, maybe from her tears. Unfolding it, the handwriting hit him like a physical blow. That crooked R, that frantic, hasty scrawl. It was Roberto, his brother, his own blood. He held the page up to the streetlight and began to read. And let me tell you, Queens, this wasn't just a letter. It was the death warrant for every lie Soraya had ever told. Alejandro, my brother, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer part of this world. And if I am gone, I am terrified of what might happen to my children. Yes, you read that correctly. I have 3 children, 3 little angels born from the purest, most secret love I ever knew. I couldn't tell you before because Soraya threatened me. She found out about my relationship with a humble woman, the mother of my children, and swore she would destroy us all if I tried to claim my share of the inheritance early. Alejandro, beware of Soraya. She is not the person you think she is. She was the one who sabotaged the factory last month. She is obsessed with the De La Vega fortune. If anything happens to me, please find my children. They have my blood. They have our eyes. Do not let that woman anywhere near them. She hates anything that might cost her a single cent. I trust you. You are the only decent man I know. Your brother who loves you, Roberto. Alejandro felt the oxygen vanish from his lungs. A silent scream clawed at his throat. Scalding, painful tears blurred his vision. Roberto hadn't died in a random car crash like everyone believed. It was murder. And those babies, those 3 little bundles Soraya had looked at with such revulsion, they were his nephews. His own flesh and blood. Alejandro let out a primal roar and slammed his fist into the pavement. His knuckles split and bled, but the physical sting was nothing compared to the agony tearing his soul apart. He hauled himself up, stumbling like a man drunk on grief. He looked back at the mansion. The music played on. Laughter. Clinking glasses, celebration. And right inside those walls, his brother's murderer was playing the role of the concerned aunt to the very children of her victim. The rage surging through him, friends. It was so consuming, he had to take 10 deep breaths just to stop himself from marching in there and strangling her with his bare hands in front of everyone. But Alejandro was a calculated man. He knew if he stormed in screaming, Soraya would just spin another web of lies. She'd claim the letter was a forgery, that Rosita wrote it. No, he had to be smarter than that. He had to play the enemy's game to dismantle her world from the inside out. He wiped the tears from his face with a fierce swipe. He tucked the letter into his inside jacket pocket, right against his heart. He straightened his tie, smoothed his hair, and pulled on a mask of icy detachment. He stepped back into the house. The humidity of the party hit him instantly, and the scent of expensive perfumes made his stomach turn. Alejandro, Soraya's voice rang out from the main salon. She was holding court with her clique, those high society vultures who only care if the hors d'oeuvres are lukewarm. There you are. We were so incredibly worried. Is everything all right with the car? Alejandro looked at her. Really looked at her. She was beaming, a flute of champagne poised in her manicured hand. The babies were nowhere to be seen. All handled, Alejandro lied, his voice gravelly and rough. The trunk is shut. Now, where are the children? Ugh, those little beasts. Soraya sighed, rolling her eyes as if she were discussing a swarm of roaches rather than children. They wouldn't stop screaming, poor things. That deranged maid probably beat them or something. I told the cook to stash them in the kitchen with some milk until the orphanage people arrive. I mean, social services. Social services? Alejandro's jaw tightened. You said they were your nephews. Why can't they stay here tonight? We have plenty of room. Soraya stiffened, her smile faltering ever so slightly. She stepped closer, smoothing his lapel with a synthetic sweetness that suddenly made Alejandro's skin crawl. Honey, try to understand. These are damaged children from a bad home. Besides, tonight is about us. I won't have wailing brats ruining our engagement party. I already called a contact at a facility. She'll pick them up quietly through the service entrance. It's for the best. The best thing for them is to be far away from you, you witch. Alejandro kept that thought to himself. Fine, but I want to see them before they go, just to make sure they're all right. Whatever for? Soraya let out a nervous little laugh. Leave it be, darling. Let's make a toast instead. Attention, everyone, she announced, spinning toward the guests with her glass raised high. My fiancé and I have an announcement. While Soraya basked in the spotlight, Alejandro used the distraction to slip away toward the kitchen. His heart hammered against his ribs. He pushed through the swing doors, and the scene before him broke his heart all over again. Lupe, the elderly, kind-hearted cook, had the 3 babies tucked into a wicker basket atop the chopping block. The infants were whimpering softly, completely spent. Mr. Alejandro, Lupe gasped, looking terrified. Miss Soraya ordered me not to feed them much since they're leaving, but they're starving, sir. Look at them sucking on their fingers. Alejandro leaned in, studying those tiny faces. Now that he knew the truth, the resemblance was unmistakable. One baby opened his eyes. They were green, emerald green, just like his own, just like Roberto's. Alejandro reached out, and the infant gripped his finger with a tiny, fierce hand, full of life. No one is taking them, Lupe, he whispered. Feed them, give them whatever they need. If Soraya asks, tell her you couldn't find the milk. Buy me some time. Lupe looked confused. Just do it. Alejandro locked eyes with her. No one touches these children without my permission. No one. Understood? Meanwhile, in the city's coldest, darkest police precinct, poor Rosita was enduring her own private hell. They had thrown her into a communal holding cell, a damp concrete box reeking of urine and despair. They had stripped her of her shoes, her belt, and even her hair tie. She stood barefoot on the freezing floor, wrapping her arms around herself to stop the shivering. I'm innocent, she screamed every time a guard walked past. Please, let me make a call. I need to warn Mr. Alejandro. Shut your mouth, servant girl, a guard bellowed from his desk without even looking up. You have the right to remain silent, so use it. You should be ashamed of yourself, kidnapping children. Rosita slid down the wall until she hit the floor. She wept silently, not for herself, but for the babies. She had overheard Soraya's plan. And now, trapped within these 4 gray walls, she felt like the most useless woman on earth. Forgive me, my little angels, Rosita whispered, kissing her empty palms, pretending she was still holding the triplets. I failed you. I promised to keep you safe, and I failed. But what Rosita didn't know, my friends, is that she wasn't alone. The truth, however delayed, always finds a crack to slip through. Back at the mansion, Alejandro was about to make the biggest gamble of his life. He pulled his hidden phone from his pocket in the bathroom and dialed. Torres, Alejandro whispered urgently. I need you at my house immediately. Bring the best private investigator you know. And Torres, bring an emergency DNA test kit. Yes, right now. I don't care what time it is. It's a matter of life and death. He hung up and stared into the mirror. His face had changed. The happy groom was gone. In his place stood a lion defending his pride. Get ready, Soraya, he told his reflection. I'm going to rip that mask off your face, piece by piece. Stay with me. Don't go anywhere because things are about to get intense. To understand how our brave Rosita ended up in a car trunk, we need to rewind the clock. Tragedies don't just happen by accident. They happen because evil people exist, and brave people fight back. Let's go back 6 hours before the party. The De La Vega mansion was a chaotic hive of florists, waiters, and frantic event planners. Rosita was upstairs, polishing the hardwood floors until they gleamed like mirrors. Her back ached, but she swallowed the pain. She desperately needed the money to support her grandmother back in the village. She was scrubbing near Soraya's office door. The door wasn't clicked shut, it hung open just a crack. Rosita knew the rules. Eyes open, mouth shut, ears closed, just like her mother taught her. But the absolute zero in Soraya's voice stopped her dead in her tracks. "I don't care about the price tag, Chato. Just get it done," Soraya hissed into the phone. Rosita froze. You don't call a wedding planner Chato. That's a thug's name. Rosita leaned in, pressing her ear against the mahogany. The brats are stashed in the guest cottage. Their mother died giving birth 2 days ago. Idiot woman, no one is coming for them. Soraya paced, her heels clicking on the floorboards. Roberto thought he took this secret to the grave, but he was sloppy. I found the hospital records. Listen to me. I want them gone tonight. Use the party as cover. It's loud, it's crowded, nobody will notice. Come in the back, sell them, toss them in the river, I don't care, just make sure they vanish. If Alejandro lays eyes on even one of those bastards, my inheritance is smoke. Rosita stifled a scream, clamping both hands over her mouth to keep the horror inside. She was talking about murdering babies, Mr. Roberto's flesh and blood. Mr. Roberto had been a saint to her. He always treated her like a human being, always asked about her folks back home. The thought of Soraya tossing his secret children out like garbage made her bile rise. Service door stays unlocked at 8, and Chato, keep them quiet on the way out. Soraya hung up with a dry, cruel cackle. That was it. Rosita's fear evaporated, replaced by a fierce mountain-moving rage. She bolted for the cottage at the edge of the grounds, slipping inside like a shadow. There they were. 3 makeshift baskets. 3 tiny souls, fast asleep, unaware a monster was coming for them. Not on my watch, Rosita whispered, blinking back tears. She needed an exit strategy fast. The front gate was a no-go, security was crawling everywhere for the gala, and she couldn't exactly hop the fence juggling triplets. Then she spotted it. Alejandro's Mercedes, parked near the service entrance. Alejandro had a bad habit of leaving the trunk unlocked when he was unloading gear. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was her only shot. She swaddled the infants in the thickest blankets she could find and grabbed the envelope Roberto had stashed in the nightstand's false bottom. She'd found it cleaning days ago and left it there on instinct. She hadn't read a word, but she knew it mattered. She scooped up all 3 bundles. They were heavy, slippery, and her arms burned. Reaching the car, she popped the trunk. Empty. Thank God. "In you go, my loves, in you go," she murmured. She tucked them in the back and climbed in after them. It was a tight squeeze, smelling of rubber and stale air. She pulled the lid down, leaving the tiniest crack for oxygen, praying no light would leak out. Then she waited. 1 hour, 2, 3, the air grew heavy, her legs cramped until they screamed. When the babies started to fuss, she hummed lullabies against their ears, weeping silently until the trunk finally popped open. Alejandro stepped out of the bathroom, shaking off the memory. Rosita had filled him in later, but right now he was back in the moment. Flashbacks wouldn't save them. He had to move. He spotted Soraya in the corner, phone pressed to her ear, looking twitchy and eyeing the kitchen door. Alejandro grabbed a flute of champagne to blend in and drifted toward her. He slid behind a marble pillar just as she hissed, "What is taking you so long?" "The party is in full swing. It's perfect cover. They're in the kitchen with that old fool Lupe. Go now. I'll double your fee. Just get them out of here." Alejandro felt his blood run hot. It wasn't a story. It was all real. She was trafficking his own nephews tonight. Soraya hung up and spun around, nearly slamming into his chest. "Oh," she clutched her pearls. "You scared me, darling." "Who was on the phone?" Alejandro asked, staring right through her. "The florist?" "Just checking on centerpieces," she lied, smooth as silk. "Soraya," Alejandro said, taking a step closer. He towered over her. "I've been thinking. I don't like the idea of your friend taking those babies this late. It's dangerous." She forced a laugh. "They're better off gone. What is wrong with you? Since when do you care about some stranger's brats?" Or do you just have the thing for the maid? Is that why you're protecting her stolen goods? That was the wrong thing to say. Alejandro's jaw tightened. Watch your mouth. I'll speak how I want about a thief, Soraya shot back, raising her voice to play the victim. She ruined my night and you're acting insane. What is your problem? Suddenly, the kitchen service door banged open. A guy walked in looking like bad news. Cheap suit, 2 sizes too small, face like a clenched fist, scanning the room for targets. It was the pug. Soraya shot him a blink and you miss it signal, steering him toward the kitchen. Alejandro caught the exchange. He knew the clock was ticking down. If that thug reached the infants, things would get violent fast. He might even take hostages. Security! Alejandro bellowed, his voice shaking the rafters. The band cut out instantly. Dead silence fell over the ballroom. Soraya went white as a sheet. What on earth? She hissed, her fingernails digging into his bicep. You're making a scene. 2 hulking private guards, armed and ready, sprinted toward them. That guy, right there, Alejandro commanded, pointing a finger at the pug who was trying to vanish among the waitstaff. He's crashing the party. Throw him out. Realizing his cover was blown, the intruder bolted for the kitchen, straight for the nursery. Take him down, Alejandro roared. The guards tackled the man before he made it 2 yards. They pinned him to the marble floor, right in front of the city's elite. Get off me, I'm just here on a job, the man hollered. The lady told me to. Shut your mouth, Soraya shrieked, rushing at him. He's drunk. Kick him out. He's just a thief, she stammered. Alejandro watched her. She was trembling, breaking out in a cold sweat. Her eyes begged him to end this before the thug spilled the beans. Alejandro decided to give her enough rope to hang herself. Hand him over to the cops, Alejandro instructed the security team. Tell them he forced his way in. As they dragged the man out, Soraya collapsed onto a velvet sofa, fanning herself theatrically, feigning a swoon. Oh, the terror! You just aren't safe anywhere, she wailed. Thank you, darling. You saved me. Alejandro knelt beside her, stroking her hair, but his gaze was absolute zero. Don't worry, sweetheart. Tonight is full of surprises, and the main event is just starting. He stood up and looked at the entrance just as the doorbell chimed. In walked his VIPs, Attorney Torres and the private physician. Who are they? Soraya asked, the color returning to her cheeks now that her henchman was gone. She thought she was in the clear. Just some friends, Alejandro replied. They're here to settle this business with your nephews. I've had my doubts, Soraya, so before we send them anywhere, we're running a DNA test. Right here, right now. Soraya's face crumpled. Her champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering into 1,000 shards on the floor. The crash was the sound of her house of cards collapsing. Alejandro just smiled. It was a predatory grin. Something wrong, love? You look pale. Oh, friends, the tension in that mansion was so thick you could choke on it. Did you hear that glass shatter a second ago? Well, that wasn't just crystal. That was Soraya's composure blowing apart. She looked like she'd just seen a specter, and for good reason. Science doesn't lie, and she knew her time was up. This is insane, Alejandro, Soraya shrieked, trying to pull herself together while a maid swept up the debris at her feet. A paternity test in the middle of our engagement party? What will people think? Are you trying to humiliate me? Alejandro, however, was the picture of calm, or at least he put on a good show. Inside, he was boiling over, but he knew the rule. If you want to catch a snake, you have to be silent. Nobody needs to know, darling, he said, his voice terrifyingly gentle. The doctor and lawyer will handle everything in the kitchen. It's just a formality. If they're really your distant nephews, like you claim, we'll be laughing about this by tomorrow. But if there's any doubt, well, better to clear the air now, don't you think? Soraya opened her mouth to argue, then noticed the room. Every high society gaze was locked onto them. Causing a scene now would make her look unhinged. She had to swallow her venom. Fine, do whatever you want, she spat, leaning into his ear. But when I'm proven right, you're going to regret humiliating me. Alejandro held her gaze, offering a faint smile. I'll take that bet. The professionals headed for the kitchen, Alejandro in tow. Upon seeing the triplets, the doctor wasted no time. He swabbed their little mouths gently. The babies slept through it, poor angels, completely unaware that a cotton stick was about to determine their entire future. Alejandro plucked a hair from his own head and handed it over. Run it against mine and the samples you have on file for my brother Roberto, Alejandro commanded. I want answers by first light. Pay whatever overtime is necessary to keep the lab running all night. Consider it done, Mr. De La Vega, the doctor replied, securing the samples in a steel briefcase. You'll have the truth at sunrise. Meanwhile, out in the garden, Soraya was chain-smoking, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She punched the number into her phone. Speak, a gravelly voice answered on the other end. It's done. No, you imbecile, Soraya hissed, barely containing her rage. The plan imploded. Alejandro demanded a DNA test. I need you to get inside Central Genetics immediately. Those results must be altered. Offer them whatever price they name. If that report proves those kids belong to Roberto, we are finished. She slammed the phone down and glared up at the full moon. Nobody separates me from my millions, she muttered. Not some sniveling brats, and certainly not some gutter trash maid whining about our poor little Rosita. Ladies, guard your hearts, because this part of the story is going to sting. The police station at that ungodly hour was the most desolate place on earth. Rosita was curled into a ball in the corner of her cell. She was freezing, not just from the air, but from a loneliness that chilled her to the marrow. Her blue maid's uniform was filthy, the sleeve torn where the officer had roughed her up during the arrest. Hey, you! A woman called out from the adjacent cell, her face map of 1,000 hard-fought battles. What are you in for? You look way too soft for this joint. I didn't do anything, Rosita sobbed, burying her face between her knees. I just wanted to save them. Honey, everyone in here is innocent. The woman laughed, though there was no malice in it. But if you messed with rich folks, you're toast. Money always wins. Rosita squeezed her eyes shut. She thought of her grandmother back in the village, depending on her paycheck. She thought of Alejandro. Would he hate her now? Did he see her as a kidnapper? The thought that the man she secretly admired might view her as a criminal hurt worse than any physical blow. Suddenly, the rhythm of authority broke the silence. Expensive leather shoes striking cheap concrete. Open the gate, a voice commanded, a voice Rosita knew in her soul. Her head snapped up. She had to be dreaming. There, gripping the steel bars, stood Alejandro. He had ditched his tuxedo jacket, his collar, his hair a chaotic mess. He looked exhausted, but his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. Mr. Alejandro, she whispered, struggling to stand on trembling legs. Rosita. Alejandro pressed closer to the bars. Instinctively, he reached through the cold steel and grasped her hands. They were like ice. Forgive me. Please, forgive me. Why are you apologizing? Rosita began to weep again, but this time from relief. Do you believe me? I believe you, he said firmly, squeezing her fingers. I found the letter. I read what Roberto wrote. I know the truth, Rosita. I know you're a hero. Rosita felt her legs give out and she collapsed to her knees, still clinging to Alejandro's hands through the iron grate. He dropped to his knees as well, not caring about ruining his trousers worth thousands of pesos on the filthy jail floor. The babies? She asked, panic rising in her voice. Are they okay? Did Soraya hurt them? They are safe, Alejandro promised, holding her gaze. I posted guards at their door. No one touches them. By tomorrow, I'll have the DNA results, and I will use them to destroy Soraya. But right now, the only thing that matters is you. Alejandro reached through to cup her cheek, wiping away a tear stained black with mascara and grime. That touch, so gentle, so full of tenderness, made time stand still in that horrific cell. Look at you, he whispered, anger simmering beneath his voice. They beat you. You have a bruise right here. I swear to you, Rosita, they will pay for every single tear you've shed. Sir, get me out of here. I'm scared, she begged. Soraya is evil. She said she'd kill me if I talked. She won't harm a hair on your head. My lawyer is processing your release right now. It's complicated because the charges are serious and it is the weekend. But I'm not moving from this spot until you walk out, or until AD. Just then, the guard slammed his baton against the bars. Visiting hours are over. Time to go, rich boy. Alejandro stood up, but he refused to let go of her hand until the very last second. Hang in there, Rosita. Be strong just a little longer. For my nephews, for me, for you, she whispered as he was forced away. Alejandro walked out of the station with his soul on fire. This was no longer just about justice for his brother. This was personal. He had seen the noblest woman in the world treated like trash, and something inside him had shifted forever. He climbed into his car, punched the steering wheel, and screamed, "This is war!" But what Alejandro didn't know was that Soraya wasn't sitting around waiting for her demise. While he drove back, Soraya was in the mansion's library, cracking Alejandro's personal safe. She knew the combination. "Let's see how brave you feel without your money, darling," she muttered, pulling out bank documents and something else, a small silver revolver Alejandro kept for protection. Soraya caressed the cold metal of the gun and smiled at herself in the mirror. Her reflection stared back, twisted and demonic. "If the De La Vega fortune won't come to me willingly, I'll just have to inherit it as a grieving widow. As for the help, I'll make sure that little maid slips in the prison shower long before sunrise." She dialed another number. "Get me the godmother in the women's wing. Listen, I need a warm welcome arranged for a new arrival. Her name is Rosita. Make it look like a prison riot. Just ensure she doesn't walk out." Good Lord. Soraya just put a hit out on Rosita from the comfort of her own home. Alejandro thinks he's playing the long game, but the sand in the hourglass is running out for our heroine. Will help arrive before it's too late? Dawn broke over Mexico City. A gray, sickly sun struggled to pierce the smog, perfectly mirroring the grim mood of our cast. Alejandro hadn't caught a single wink of sleep. He'd spent the entire night in his study, haunting the armchair, eyes locked on a photograph of his late brother, Roberto. "I failed you, brother," he whispered to the frame. "I let the wolf right into the sheepfold. But I swear, I'll clear your name." At 7 o'clock sharp, the silence was shattered. It was the doctor. Alejandro snatched the receiver on the first ring. "Yes, talk to me." "Mr. De La Vega, I have the results. It's positive. 99.9% match with Roberto's sample. There is no doubt, sir. Those 3 children are your biological nephews. They are true De La Vegas." Alejandro squeezed his eyes shut and finally exhaled, releasing a breath he felt like he'd been holding for years. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. They were his blood, his family. "Thank you, doctor. Prepare the official dossier. I need it in my hands today." He hung up, a strange calm settling over him. He finally had the ammunition to obliterate Soraya, but first he had a rescue mission to execute. Meanwhile, the atmosphere inside the penitentiary had turned thick and volatile. The other inmates circled Rosita with the eyes of predators stalking wounded prey. La Madrina, a towering woman with ink crawling up her neck, cornered her in the line for the watery slop they called breakfast. "So you're the little rat who stole from the boss lady, huh?" The godmother shoved Rosita hard against the cold concrete. "I didn't steal anything," Rosita stammered, trembling but refusing to look away. "I was protecting the children." "Well, the boss lady sends her regards." La Madrina produced a sharpened toothbrush, a crude, deadly shiv, and raised her arm. Rosita squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the final blow. "Stand down," a guard bellowed, storming into the mess hall. "Rosa Maria Fernandez, you're being released." The shiv froze millimeters from Rosita's stomach. La Madrina vanished the weapon and spat on the floor. "Lucky break, doll, but accidents happen on the outside too." Rosita's eyes snapped open, her chest heaving. Free. She was free. Stepping out of the precinct, the sunlight hit her face, and there he was. Not the chauffeur, not the lawyer, Alejandro. Leaning against his Mercedes, dark shades hiding his exhaustion, wearing a smile that could outshine the morning sun. "Sir!" Rosita didn't walk. She sprinted. To hell with protocol, to hell with him being her boss. She threw herself straight into his arms. Alejandro caught her, wrapping her in a fierce, protective embrace. He smelled like expensive soap and safety. "I told you I'd get you out. I just paid the highest bail in the history of this precinct, and I don't care one bit. Come on, it's not safe here." He bundled her into the car and peeled away, burning rubber. "Where are we going?" Rosita asked, wiping her tears. "To the mansion." "No, you can't go back there yet. Soraya is too dangerous. I'm taking you somewhere off the grid." Alejandro drove toward Santa Fe, pulling up to a high-rise aimed at the clouds, a private sanctuary he used for confidential business dealings. No one knew this place existed, not even Soraya. Walking in, Rosita was struck dumb by the elegance. Everything was pristine, modern, and white. But the real treasure was waiting in the living room. There, in a makeshift playpen watched over by Lupe, the loyal cook Alejandro had spirited away, were the triplets. "My babies!" Rosita cried out, rushing toward them. Folks, this scene would have melted a heart of stone. Hearing her voice, the little ones started waving their tiny fists. Rosita scooped them up, kissing them, inhaling their scent. Alejandro watched from the doorway, deeply moved. Epiphany struck. Soraya might be the official fiancé, but Rosita was the mother these children needed, and perhaps the woman he needed too. "They're my nephews, Rosita," Alejandro said, walking over to join them. The DNA test confirmed it. Rosita looked up, eyes glistening. "I knew it. Mr. Roberto loved them so much." "We need to talk." Alejandro's expression hardened. "Tonight is the official engagement party. The press will be there, my partners, everyone. Soraya thinks she's won the war. She thinks you're rotting in a cell and that the DNA results were faked. She tried to bribe the lab, but I got to her contact first." "So, what do we do?" Rosita asked, a tremor of fear in her voice. "We are going to that party," Alejandro said, taking her hand. "But you're not walking in as the help. You're walking in through the front door. Lupe will get you ready, designer gowns, diamonds, whatever you need." "But, sir, I don't know the first thing about being a high society lady." "I don't need you to be a society lady. I need you to find your courage, your truth, and your beauty. Tonight, Rosita, the charade ends, and you'll have a front row seat to watch Soraya pay for everything." Meanwhile, back at the estate, Soraya was floating on air. Her mole in the prison had lied to save his own skin, claiming Rosita was merely shaken up, while her contact at the lab promised the DNA results would come back negative. She was busy admiring herself in a dazzling evening gown, a gold number dripping in sequins. "I am untouchable," she whispered to her reflection. "Tonight I announce the wedding date, give it a month before Alejandro meets a tragic accident, and I become the wealthiest widow in all of Mexico." She didn't have a clue. She had no way of knowing that miles away, Alejandro was watching Rosita's metamorphosis. Lupe had truly worked a miracle. When Rosita stepped out of the bedroom, Alejandro completely lost the power of speech. She wore an emerald gown, simple yet sophisticated, that hugged her silhouette and made her dark skin glow. Her hair cascaded down in soft, loose waves. The maid in the blue uniform was gone without a trace. Standing there was nothing short of a queen. "You look—" Alejandro cleared his throat, suddenly nervous. "You look breathtaking." Rosita felt the heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you, sir, but I'm terrified." "Don't be." Alejandro offered his arm. "You aren't walking into this alone. You're with me. And I swear on my brother's grave, after tonight, no one will ever look down on you again." They climbed into the car, heading toward destiny, straight into the lion's den where everything was about to blow up. Alejandro steered with one hand while the other instinctively found Rosita's. She didn't pull away. In that shared silence, something deeper than gratitude began to bloom. They pulled up to the mansion where a swarm of photographers waited at the gates. Camera flashes erupted like lightning. "Ready?" Alejandro asked. "Ready," Rosita replied, tilting her chin up. She thought of the babies, safe and sound with Lupe back at the apartment. For their sake, she would face the devil himself. The valet swung the door open. Alejandro stepped out first, looking imposing and handsome, reaching a hand back inside. The press expected Soraya or a business partner, but when Rosita emerged in emerald green with her head held high, the crowd went dead silent. Then came the whispers. Who is she? Is she a model? And Soraya, standing at the top of the grand staircase greeting guests, she saw the whole thing unravel. Her glass slipped from her fingers for the second time in 24 hours. "What is that filth doing here?" she hissed, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. Alejandro looked up, locked eyes with Soraya, and smiled. It was cold as ice. The game was on. Game. Oh, my dear friends, what a moment. I still get goosebumps just thinking about that grand entrance. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Rosita, our sweet Rosita, who was scrubbing floors and taking abuse just hours ago, was now walking the red carpet on the arm of Mexico's most eligible bachelor. And she wasn't walking with her head down, no ma'am. She strode in like she owned the place, that emerald fabric flowing with every step, radiating a dignity that money just can't buy. Soraya stumbled down the final few steps. Her face was a picture. Pure hate, disbelief, and terror, all barely hidden behind a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. She smoothed her gold dress, took a deep breath to swallow her venom, and launched her attack like the viper she is. "Alejandro!" she shrieked with that fake, high-pitched joy. "What a surprise! I didn't realize we were hosting a charity case tonight. Did you bring the help so she could see how decent people live? A few nervous titters rippled through the crowd. High society is cruel, my friends, and they live for the drama. But Alejandro wasn't laughing. He stopped dead in the center of the room. He gently released Rosita's arm, only to slide his hand around her waist. It was a possessive, protective move that made Soraya's breath hitch in her throat. "You're mistaken, Soraya," Alejandro boomed, his voice filling the hall without needing a microphone. "Rosita isn't here as charity. She's here because she is the most important person in this room, more important than you, and certainly more important than me." A shockwave went through the guests. Matrons dripping in heavy jewels fanned themselves furiously. What did he say? Is he leaving Soraya for the maid? It was pandemonium. Soraya marched over, invading Rosita's personal space, her bloodshot eyes locking onto the girl. "Listen to me, you uppity little stray," Soraya hissed through gritted teeth, low enough for only them to hear. "I don't know what voodoo you used on him, or what lies you whispered in bed, but this is my party, and I will kick you out myself. You have 5 minutes to vanish before I call security and have you arrested for stealing that dress." Rosita felt that familiar dread, the knot in her stomach that formed whenever the boss screamed at her, but then she felt the warmth of Alejandro's hand against her back. Her mind flashed back to the infants, those 3 innocent souls Soraya had tried to discard like garbage, and suddenly her terror forged itself into pure rage. Rosita squared her shoulders, locking eyes with Soraya, refusing to cower for the first time ever. "I'm staying right here," she stated, her tone unwavering. "And this gown wasn't filched. It was gifted by a man who actually appreciates honesty. You ought to be worrying about the secrets resurfacing tonight, not my attire." Boom. Rosita 1, Soraya 0. The woman stood there completely thunderstruck. The quiet help had never dared speak up before. Alejandro beamed, swelling with pride. "Come along, darling, there are associates you need to meet." They strolled off, leaving Soraya stranded center stage, jaw dropped and hands balling into fists. It was a total public shaming. Soraya could feel the weight of every judgmental stare burning holes in her back. "Poor Soraya," the whisper circulated. Alejandro traded her in for the help. She bolted for the guest restroom, slamming the door behind her. Facing the mirror, she saw beads of sweat breaking through. Her mascara was smudging. With frantic hands, she clawed open her designer clutch. There it lay, the silver pistol gleaming with a cold malice under the vanity lights. "No one disrespects me," she hissed, stroking the steel barrel. "No one steals what belongs to me. If Alejandro thinks he can parade fake evidence about those brats, he's dead wrong. I'm ending this charade tonight." She reapplied her blood-red lipstick, holstered the gun, and marched out with her head held high. Time to play her ace, the victim card. Back in the ballroom, Alejandro was setting the trap. He introduced Rosita not as staff, but as the woman who rescued my family's heritage. Men gazed at her natural elegance in awe, while the women, green with envy, had to admit she carried herself with grace. "Alejandro," Rosita whispered the moment they caught private second by the hors d'oeuvres. "I've got a bad feeling about this. Soraya hasn't taken her eyes off us. She's keeping one hand in her purse constantly." "Relax," he soothed, handing her a sparkling water. "I've got undercover security stationed everywhere. Besides, the bombshell I'm dropping in a few minutes will paralyze her completely. Trust me." "I do," she replied. And folks, that shared glance held more passion than 1,000 romance novels combined. It hit Alejandro then. He couldn't imagine life without this fearless woman by his side. The music died down as the house lights faded. A single spotlight cut through the dark, highlighting the microphone on the dais. It was time. But Soraya lunged forward, beating Alejandro to the stage and snatching the mic first. She was hijacking the narrative. "Good evening, everyone," she shrieked, plastering on a manic grin. "Thank you for joining us to celebrate our love. I know there have been a few distractions tonight." She shot a venomous look at Rosita. "But I'm thrilled to announce that Alejandro and I are moving up the wedding date. We're tying the knot this very weekend." The applause was scattered and painfully thin. The crowd looked baffled. Alejandro ascended the steps slowly, moving like a predator closing in on a kill. He took his place beside Soraya. She tried to embrace him, but he stood as unyielding as stone. "Thank you, Soraya, for that spirited announcement," Alejandro said, firmly prying the microphone from her grip with deceptive gentleness. "But before we discuss weddings, we need to discuss family. Blood. Truths buried deep beneath layers of deceit." Soraya went white and lunged for the mic, but Alejandro physically walled her off. "Tonight," Alejandro continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous register, was supposed to be an engagement party. Instead, it's a welcome home party. A welcome for the rightful heirs to the La Vega Empire. Soraya felt the floor drop out from under her. "Alejandro, you're drunk!" she screamed off mic, tugging frantically at his arm. "Let's leave, now." "I'm not drunk, Soraya. I've never been more sober." Alejandro signaled the AV booth. Behind them, the massive screen meant for a couple's montage flickered to life, but there were no romantic snapshots. Instead, a colossal scanned document appeared, crystal clear, bearing the official seals of the country's top genetic lab. Highlighted in massive red text was the conclusion. Probability of kinship, 99.9%. Relationship, uncle and nephews. The ballroom erupted. "My God," a woman gasped. "Those are Roberto's children." Alejandro scanned the crowd. "Exactly. My late brother Roberto had 3 children. 3 babies someone tried to erase from existence. 3 children literally pulled from the garbage by this courageous woman." He pointed to Rosita as the spotlight swung to find her. Tears welled in Rosita's eyes as she pressed a hand over her heart. The applause began as a hesitant ripple before swelling into a roar. Soraya stood vibrating with rage, watching her grand scheme crumble to dust. "Lies!" Soraya shrieked, finally finding her voice. "That document is a forgery. That thieving woman faked the whole thing to shake us down. Don't listen to her. Those children are just gutter trash." Alejandro spun around to face her. The affection was gone from his eyes, replaced by pure revulsion. "Gutter trash, Soraya? Is that really how you see them? Then explain why you paid 50,000 pesos to a hitman named Chato to erase them." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Soraya stumbled backward, bumping into the projection screen. I have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, really?" Alejandro produced a small remote from his pocket. "Maybe this will jog your memory." He clicked the button. It wasn't music that filled the room, but a voice recording. Crystal clear, chilling. "Make them vanish tonight. Use the party as cover. Dump them in the river for all I care. Just make sure they're never found. If Alejandro lays eyes on even one of those brats, I lose my inheritance." It was Soraya's voice. Unmistakable, vicious, murderous. The guests gasped, hands flying to their mouths in horror. Her social circle recoiled from the stage as if she were patient zero of a plague. Soraya darted her eyes around, trapped. Her gaze was frantic, bouncing from Alejandro to Rosita, then to the exit, where security stood like a wall. The high society mask had shattered, revealing the beast beneath. And when a monster is cornered, my friends, it strikes. The De La Vega Grand Hall had transformed into a public tribunal. Soraya's recorded command hung in the air like a curse. "Dump them in the river. I don't care." The elite of Mexico stared at her, their judgment heavy as stones. Alejandro stared at her with glacial indifference. "Game over, Soraya. The authorities are en route, but they aren't coming for Rosita this time. They're coming for you. Attempted murder, kidnapping, fraud." Soraya let out a laugh, a jagged, high-pitched sound that froze the blood in their veins. She looked unhinged. "The police?" she sneered, eyes wide and manic. "You think you can cage me? I am Soraya Montenegro de la Vega. I own this world. You and your dead brother are nothing without me." Suddenly, her hand snapped toward her gold clutch. "Watch out!" Rosita screamed from the floor. Her warning came a split second too late. Soraya drew a revolver, the steel glinting under the spotlights. Screams erupted as the crowd hit the deck. Glass shattered, chairs toppled, and sheer panic seized the room. She leveled the barrel at Alejandro's chest. "Nobody move!" she shrieked, hand trembling but finger tight on the trigger. "Anyone takes a step and I blow this idiot's heart out." Alejandro slowly raised his hands, keeping his composure. "Soraya, lower the gun. Don't dig this hole any deeper. It's finished." "I never lose," she wailed, tears carving paths through her ruined makeup. "It was supposed to be perfect. I was going to have it all, but you had to open that damn trunk. And you—" She swung the muzzle toward Rosita, who stood frozen near the front row. "You filthy maid! This is all your fault. You should have rotted and died in that prison cell." "Leave her alone!" Alejandro roared, stepping into the line of fire to shield Rosita. "Stay back!" Bang! Soraya fired the round into the ceiling. The deafening crack brought down a shower of plaster, sending the guests into hysterics. Amidst the prayers and sobbing, Soraya issued a cold promise. "The next bullet goes in your skull, Alejandro. Listen to me. I want a car out front. I want the keys to the private jet. and I'm taking the help as insurance. If anyone follows, she dies." Rosita's knees buckled. After all her fighting, it was going to end here. Death had come for her. But then she caught Alejandro's gaze, a subtle, microscopic signal. "Trust me." "Get over here, stray," Soraya commanded, descending from the stage while sweeping the gun across the room. "Up here, now." Rosita walked forward, trembling with every step. As she climbed the stairs, Soraya snatched her by the hair and jammed the cold steel barrel against her temple. "Twitch, and you're dead," she hissed. Alejandro felt his insides turn to ice. Watching the woman he loved with a gun to her head was a waking nightmare, but panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. Soraya was a live wire. One spark, and it would all end in blood. "Soraya, please," Alejandro said, his voice dropping to a soothing, bargaining tone. "Let her go. Take me instead. I'm the one you want. I control the money. She's nobody." "No!" Soraya screamed. "She's the one who matters to you. I see it in your disgusting eyes. You fell for the servant girl. How poetic." "Well, now you can watch her bleed out." In that split second, with life hanging by a thread, the impossible happened. The main doors of this mansion burst open with a thunderous crash. It wasn't the police. It was an elderly woman in a wheelchair being wheeled in by a stern-looking nurse. She had hair as white as winter snow and a hawk-like gaze that commanded absolute respect, age notwithstanding. Soraya froze at the sight of her. The gun in her hand dipped just an inch. "Grandmother," Soraya whispered, the color draining from her face. It was Doña Matilde, the family matriarch. A woman so feared and revered that everyone assumed she was senile and locked away in some Swiss facility. Yet, here she was. "Put that weapon down, you foolish girl," Matilde commanded, her voice raspy but striking with the force of a hammer. Her wheelchair parted the sea of guests cowering on the floor. "Stay back," Soraya screamed, terrified and confused. "You locked me up. You said I was crazy." "Because you are," the old woman retorted, breaking her chair just a few yards from the stage. "You have disgraced our name. You tried to murder innocent children. The bank called me, Soraya. You tried to drain my trust funds this morning. You are nothing but a thief and a killer." The distraction worked perfectly. Confronted by her childhood nightmare, her domineering grandmother, Soraya let her guard down for a split second. She focused on the old woman, losing track of Alejandro. Alejandro didn't hesitate. He moved with the speed of a tiger, lunging at Soraya and jamming her wrist upward. "Let me go!" Soraya shrieked. Bang! The gun went off again, but the bullet shattered a chandelier above them, raining down crystal shards. Alejandro and Soraya wrestled for control. She fought like a cornered animal, biting and clawing. But Alejandro was stronger. He twisted her wrist until the revolver hit the floor with a metallic clatter. "Run, Rosita!" Alejandro yelled. But instead of fleeing, Rosita's eyes locked onto the weapon on the floor. She saw Soraya reach for a small dagger hidden in her garter. The woman was a walking arsenal. She was about to stab Alejandro in the ribs. Rosita didn't think twice. She grabbed a heavy vase from a decorative table and charged. "Leave my man alone!" Rosita screamed. Crash! She smashed the vase right over Soraya's head. Soraya's eyes went wide. She stood motionless for a beat, wobbled, and then collapsed to the floor like a sack of potatoes, out cold. Silence reclaimed the room for 3 long seconds. Alejandro, gasping for air, his shirt torn and cheek bleeding, stared at Soraya's unconscious body. Then he looked at Rosita, who was trembling with adrenaline, clutching the jagged remains of the vase. "Your man?" Alejandro asked, a tired but joyful smile breaking through the chaos. Rosita dropped the pottery shards and covered her mouth, realizing what she had just shouted for the whole world to hear. Sorry, I just meant—" Alejandro didn't let her finish. He pulled her in by the waist and kissed her. It was a kiss straight out of the movies, ladies. A kiss that tasted of victory, danger, and true love. It was enough to make the guests forget their fear, stand up, and burst into applause. That was when the real police finally stormed in, slapping cuffs on a groggy, half-conscious Soraya. They hauled her up. As they dragged her past Rosita, Soraya pried open one swollen purple eye. "This isn't over," she slurred. "I'll be back." "Shut it, lady," the officer said, shoving her forward. "You aren't coming back from where you're going." The villain was taken away. The grandmother, Doña Matilde, rolled up to Rosita and looked her up and down. Rosita braced herself for an insult. "You've got a good right hook, child," the old woman said. "You gave her the beating I should have given her years ago." Take care of those children and this boy." Alejandro wrapped his arms around Rosita. "It's done," he said. "The nightmare is over." But Rosita looked toward the exit. "The kids. I need to see my babies." Alejandro smiled. "Let's go home. Our real home." They walked out of the mansion, leaving behind the hollow luxury, the gossip, and the hypocrisy. Outside, the night air was crisp and clean. They got into the car, but this time Rosita didn't sit in the back. She sat up front, right next to Alejandro, the co-pilot of her life. It looked like the perfect happy ending, didn't it? Justice served, love found, villain jailed. But my friends, life always saves one last surprise for the end. Days later, while sorting through the legal mess Soraya left behind, Alejandro's lawyer found a document in her secret safe. It wasn't about money, it was an old birth certificate. Alejandro read it and went pale. He called Rosita into his study immediately. "Rosita, you need to see this." "What's wrong?" she asked, bouncing one of the triplets on her hip. "It's about your mother, the one you said abandoned you as a baby." "Yeah, I never knew who she was. My grandma just told me she was a maid in a wealthy house." Alejandro handed her the paper, his hands shaking. "Rosita, according to this document Soraya was hiding for blackmail, you aren't the daughter of some stranger." Rosita read the mother's name on the certificate. Her eyes welled up with tears instantly. "That's impossible," Alejandro nodded slowly. "It is possible, and it changes everything. Ladies, take a deep breath with me, because that piece of paper in Alejandro's hands, it's not just a document. It's a nuclear bomb about to blow Rosita's world apart. Remember how Soraya guarded that birth certificate like it was the crown jewels? Well, the truth is finally coming out. Fate might seem cruel sometimes, but it always has a master plan to put the true queen on the throne and lock the witch in her dungeon." Alejandro stood there, hands trembling, his eyes darting between the sheet of paper and Rosita's confused face. "Rosita, you need to sit down," he said, his voice cracking under the weight of the moment. "You aren't going to believe this." She perched on the edge of the leather sofa, clutching one of the triplets tight against her chest as if drawing strength from the child. "Sir, what's wrong? You're scaring me. Is that woman Soraya, my mother?" The question came out choked with terror. Alejandro immediately shook his head. "No. God, no." "No, Rosita, look at this name. Look at your father's name." She took the paper, her eyes scanning the faded typewriter ink. "Father, Luis Fernando de la Garza. Mother, Maria Hernandez." Rosita whispered the names. "I don't know who this Luis is. My grandmother back in the village never mentioned him. She only ever told me my mother died of a broken heart right after I was born." "Luis Fernando de la Garza," Alejandro repeated, pacing the floor. "He was Doña Matilde's only son, Soraya's uncle. He died in a crash 20 years ago. Everyone thought he passed away without children, but clearly he had a secret life with your mother." Rosita gasped, covering her mouth with her hand in shock. "This means you and Soraya are first cousins. But more importantly, you are Doña Matilde's direct granddaughter and the true heir to the De la Garza fortune." The silence in the room was deafening. Rosita's mind simply couldn't grasp it. She, the maid who ate scraps in the kitchen, actually owned half the city. "That's why Soraya hated you," Alejandro said, finally connecting the dots. "It wasn't just snobbery, it was terror. She knew exactly who you were. She found this paper and buried it. She hired you to keep you under her thumb, to humiliate you, and ensure you never found out who you really are. She had you scrubbing her floors while knowing you were her own flesh and blood." Just then, the office door creaked open. Doña Matilde rolled in, her wheelchair pushed by the nurse. The old woman's eyes were swollen and red. She had heard every word from the hallway. "Let me see her," Matilde said, her voice wavering. "Come here, child." Rosita stood up, shaking like a leaf, and approached the imposing matriarch. Matilde lifted a wrinkled hand heavy with rings and gently touched Rosita's cheek. "The eyes!" the old woman sobbed. "You have my Luisa's eyes." Those sad, kind eyes. My God, my granddaughter was right under my nose the whole time, and that viper made me believe you were dead. "Doña Matilde." Rosita wept, collapsing to her knees and burying her face in the lap of the grandmother she never knew. "Forgive me, my daughter. Forgive me for not finding you sooner," the matriarch cried, kissing the top of Rosita's head. "But I swear to you, from this day forward, no one will ever look down on you again. You are a De la Garza, and Soraya will rot in prison for stealing all these years from us." It was a moment, ladies, that even the best Hollywood director couldn't have scripted better. two souls reunited after being torn apart by greed. Alejandro watched with a smile, but a shadow of doubt crept into his heart. Now that Rosita was a wealthy heiress, would she still want him, or would this new world pull them apart? But before facing the future, the past had to be buried. A few days later, Rosita made a request that chilled everyone to the bone. She wanted to visit Soraya. "Don't do it," Alejandro begged. "She's pure poison. You don't need that darkness." "I do need this," Rosita said firmly. Her voice wasn't a whisper anymore. She carried herself with a newfound strength. "I need to look her in the eye and tell her she didn't break me. I have to close that door for good." They drove to the Santa Marta Women's Penitentiary. The place was gray, heavy, and suffocating. Rosita walked into the visitation room looking flawless but understated. Alejandro stood guard outside, ready to rush in. Soraya appeared on the other side of the bulletproof glass. She wore the beige inmate uniform, no makeup. Her once perfect hair was dull and pulled back in a sloppy ponytail. She looked wasted away, but those eyes still dripped with pure hate. Soraya snatched the intercom phone and let out a dry, crackling laugh. Well, Cinderella came to visit the witch. What do you want? Here to gloat? To show off your new clothes?" Rosita picked up the receiver calmly. "I came to ask why, that's all." "We were family, Soraya. We share the same blood. Why all the hatred? Why not just tell me the truth? We could have been sisters." "Sisters?" Soraya spat the word out like it tasted like bile. "You and I could never be sisters. You're the maid's brat. I'm a lady. My father always envied yours because he was Grandma's favorite. The moment I found out you existed, that my Uncle Luis had a child with that indigenous woman, I did the math. If Grandma ever tracked you down, I'd be left with zero. It was all going to belong to you." Rosita shook her head, her voice soft. "Cash isn't everything, Soraya. Look where cash got you." Soraya slammed her fist against the plexiglass partition. "Shut up. Don't you dare preach to me. You won this round, Stray. You walked away with the fortune, the old lady, and Alejandro. But mark my words, he'll get sick of you. You're dull. You're a nobody. Eventually, he's going to go looking for a real woman." Rosita studied her cousin's face. The fear was gone, replaced by pure pity. "You're dead wrong, Soraya. Alejandro didn't fall for my bank account. I was penniless when we met. He fell for me because I know how to love. And you? You were so hollow inside that all the millions on earth couldn't fill that black void in your soul." Soraya went silent, her chest heaving with rage. Rosita placed the receiver back on the hook. "May God have mercy on you, cousin. Because I've already forgiven you. I refuse to carry your poison anymore. You can keep that hate right here, inside these four walls." Rosita turned her back and started walking toward the exit. "Don't walk away!" Soraya screamed, hammering the glass like a wild animal. "Get back here! I hate you! I hate you!" The guards swarmed in, restraining a cursing Soraya as they dragged her back toward the shadows of her cell. Rosita stepped out into the blinding sunlight. Alejandro was right there waiting. "You okay?" he asked, pulling her into a hug. She inhaled the crisp air of freedom. "Yeah, I'm finally free, Alejandro." He kissed her forehead gently. "And let's go home. We've got 3 little ones trying to learn Dada and Mama, and I think they're calling for us." They climbed into the car, leaving the prison in the rearview mirror, leaving behind the bitterness and the history. But ladies, if you think we're wrapping this up with a simple peck on the cheek, think again. We're missing the best part, the celebration of real love. The wedding of the century starts now. It has been 1 year, my queens. 365 days since that nightmare in the open car trunk changed our destiny. You wouldn't believe the De La Garza garden if you saw how the sun hits it today. Gone is that cold, pretentious vibe. Now, it's scattered with toys, bursting with bright blooms, and echoing with laughter. The kind of toddler giggles that can patch up any broken heart. The triplets, Roberto Jr., Luis, and little Fernandito, are on the move. Well, sprinting like maniacs is more accurate. Little guys in white linen suits chasing Doña Matilde, who's got herself a motorized wheelchair just to keep up with these little devils. She laughs and says she's dropped 10 years off her age. Finding her granddaughter and gaining 3 great-grandkids brought her back to life. Upstairs, Alejandro stands before the mirror, fighting with his tie knot. This isn't just a business suit. It's for the altar. He's sweating. "Easy, brother," he whispers to Roberto's photo on the side table. "Keeping my word today. I'll watch over them, and I'm going to make the most incredible woman on earth happy." The ceremony is moments away down below. They had no interest in being boxed up inside some extravagant, stuffy hall. They chose the sanctuary of the garden, standing amidst creation under the watchful light of God. Sure, the high society crowd is there, but so are Rosita's village neighbors, her grandma living like a queen, and the house staff sitting front row as guests of honor. The music swells, violins drift into a sweet melody. Alejandro stands at the altar, breath hitched. There she is, Rosita. No flashy designer dress covered in diamonds. She's in white, handmade Mexican lace, simple and stunning. Fresh flowers in her hair, looking like an absolute angel. She walks arm in arm with Doña Matilde, who insisted on giving her away. The grandmother is weeping tears of pure pride. When Rosita reaches the altar, Alejandro takes her hands. They lock eyes, and that look says it all. The fear in the trunk, the jail, the humiliation, the truth coming out. Every second of pain was the price of admission for this moment. The judge starts speaking, but nobody really listens until the vows. Rosita, Alejandro's voice is steady and clear. A year ago, I found you in the dark, inside my car. You were terrified, covered in grime and desperate. But even then, you were glowing. You shone with courage. You loved those kids like your own. You taught me that true nobility isn't in a last name, it's in the heart. I don't love you for who you are now, the De la Garza heiress. I love you for the woman you've always been. My brave Rosita. I promise to cherish you, respect you, and yes, wash the dishes when you need a break, every single day of my life. The crowd chuckles through their tears. Rosita brushes a drop from her cheek. Alejandro, she says, in that gentle tone that melted a billionaire, you were the only one who saw me when I was invisible to the world. You defended me when everyone else attacked. You didn't just give me a roof over my head or a family to call my own. You gave me back my dignity, the one thing I thought was gone forever. I vow to stand by you as your partner, your best friend, and the mother to our children, the three standing right here, and the little one growing inside me. Boom! She drops the bombshell. Alejandro's eyes go wide as saucers. Say what? He blurts out, completely ignoring the microphone in his hand. Wait, are you? Rosita just beams, resting a hand on her stomach. Yes, we're going to be parents again. The whole garden erupts, cheering, clapping, absolute chaos. Doña Matilde throws her hands up, thanking the heavens above. Alejandro doesn't even wait for the officiant's cue. He sweeps her off her feet, spinning her around like a giddy schoolboy while she plants a passionate kiss right on his lips. I love you! He screams at the top of his lungs. I love you! I love you! The triplets rush in, tackling their legs, turning it into one massive, happy family pile-on. Way off in the distance, past the mansion gates, a squad car cruises by, hauling away another batch of criminals. But inside, nobody notices. There's no room for darkness here anymore. Soraya is just a ghost of the past, fading into nothing. They partied until the sun came up. We're talking endless tacos, mariachi bands playing all night, champagne flowing alongside the sweet horchata. Rich folks, poor folks, it didn't matter. Everyone mingled, proving that status means nothing when you're celebrating true love. And that, my dear friends, is how the story ends. It started with a cold-blooded crime, but it's closing with a beautiful blessing. It's a reminder that no matter how bleak the road gets, if you keep your heart kind and brave, the light will always break through the darkness. It shows us that looks can be deceiving. Sometimes the monster is the one draped in designer silk, and the angel is the one wearing a maid's uniform. Alejandro and Rosita proved that love is blind to social status, and that family isn't defined by blood, but by loyalty. Thank you for riding this roller coaster of tears, rage, and joy with me. I hope you loved hearing it as much as I loved telling it. The end. Oh man, what a gorgeous finale. I am literally ugly crying right now. Did any of you see Rosita's pregnancy coming? I am so hyped. Alright, my queens, if you enjoyed this, please smash that like button before you go. Send this to your besties so they can swoon over Alejandro too, and don't forget to subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the next story. I promise it's going to be even more shocking than this one. Let me know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Was it Soraya getting clobbered with the vase or the wedding? I'm reading all your replies. Love you guys so much. Catch you in the next one. Kisses.